Okay, Ted, we're changing scenes today. We're actually out front instead of out back, so when a car goes by, we'll pause for a second in this lovely sylvan setting. You wanted to talk today about what happened after the war between the states, what happened to the southern states, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, well we have to bear in mind the 14th Amendment, which I shall read in part, that was adopted on July 28, 1868. However, the policies of the 14th Amendment were put in place shortly after Lincoln's assassination, or it was leading up to the 14th Amendment stipulations. During Lincoln's time, this was all about, remember, the war between the states was not about slavery. It was about states' rights. It was about states' rights being superior to the federal government's rights inside our states. Remember, in this document, which is the Constitution of the United States, Congress's power to legislate is held only to the less than 10 mile square area in Washington, D.C. They can't make laws outside Washington, D.C. All of the codes, the U.S. codes, the U.S. title, the titles in the code, it has to do with Washington, D.C. So we have allowed, by being ignorant or buying into propaganda, would you say?
Uninformed.
Well,
Disinformed.
we have been cooked like frogs in a pot, and we're pretty, those frog legs are looking pretty good at this point to some. The 14th Amendment says, Section 1, all persons born or naturalized in the United States. Remember, this book says the United States is the less than 10 mile square area of Washington, D.C. and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. To what jurisdiction would they be subject?
The federal government.
Right. And subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Okay, so now we have others, the state citizens. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. So what it says is, when in Texas, we can't make any law that would abridge the privileges or immunities of any of the United States citizens. Okay? Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Okay, so any person within its jurisdiction. Now, is that the jurisdiction of the state? It sticks, I'd have to diagram the sentence, but I would think that it's within the state. So we have two classes right there in the 14th Amendment. You can see we have citizens of the United States and people of the states. Two separate, distinct classes of people. And they were totally separate. Now, one of the things they did, well, maybe Lincoln died in 1865. He was assassinated. I do believe that Lincoln had a change of heart. I believe that after being the most draconian leader on the planet in those days and up to now, that he had the blood of almost 600,000 American boys, men and boys, women, children on his hands, and he was sick of it. His son had died, his wife was crazy. Anything he touched seemed to turn to, he seemed to decimate it. And I believe that he had a change of heart, he had a twinge of conscience, and he wanted to not carry forth with the purpose of the war between the states, which was to federalize the states, to do away with states' rights. But he died, and Johnson, his vice president, did not want to have anything to do with the Reconstruction Acts, and he was impeached as a result of his adamant resistance to the Reconstruction Acts. However, from the time Lincoln died, which is when the war, a week after Lee and Grant met at Appomattox, to when the states started to come back into the United States, they were under Reconstruction Acts or Lincoln's General Order 100 or the Lieber Code or whatever you want to say. They were under that. So they military was sent into these states, into Georgia, into Alabama, into South Carolina, Texas. The military was sent into these states in order to put these people under military law, more than martial law, military law. And the soldiers that were in these states were housed, they took their own housing, which is a violation of the Constitution, because no soldiers can be quartered in people's homes. They totally denied the existence of the Constitution or the Bill of Rights, because these people were nothing. They had to be subjugated. They had to become subjects. They had to stop the rebellion of the people, the reason for the war. The war was very, very bitter. It caused rifts between brothers, families, nephews, uncles, cousins. Brothers died on one side in the north, one side in the south. It was a very evil, hard-fought battle that decimated the American people. And most of these people, you have to understand, died from dysentery more than from being shot or killed. The conditions were harsh during the 5 years of this war, 1860 to 1865. It was not a declared war. It was just a war that started. And the South fought for states' rights. The North fought for subjugation.
And it was the understanding of both Grant and Lee that the war was just ending. This was not a continuation of the war.
Gentleman's surrender.
Yes.
A gentleman's agreement.
Yes. You like to say, and I love the point, that Lee went away with his guns and his
sword.
Sword and his
arms.
His arms and his horse.
Right.
So that was what they needed to fight the battle. Theoretically, they could continue because they had the wherewithal to do that.
It was just a gentleman's agreement from two old buddies from West Point, and they said, "Let's stop. There's nobody wins here. Nobody wins," and they left. And then Lincoln was assassinated, and then the military was implemented in the southern states, the ones that had rebelled, and the military was quartered in the houses. It raped, it pillaged, it plundered, it burned. These people came in and could behave like animals against these people, these southern, the people left in the southern states. It was absolutely decimating. It was a horrible, horrible time. And they were under total and complete martial law. And the armies could do anything and were encouraged to do anything. They had no recourse. They had nobody to protect them. They had nothing, the southern people. They were helpless and hopeless. And all of this was put in place to force the states to sign the documents that they had to, in the 14th Amendment it says, "No person shall be a senator, representative in Congress, or elector, or president, and vice president, or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state, who having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States or as a member of any state legislature or as an executive or judicial officer of any state," in other words, everybody, to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in an insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. But Congress may, by a vote of 2/3 of each house, remove such disability. So the Congress could allow them to come in after they had fought against the North by removing such disability. Well, 2/3 of what? 2/3 of the Congress that was rump? 2/3 of the Congress that was matriculated by these states that surrendered, capitulated, were subjugated to the 14th Amendment, and statehood was restored to them again. We have a a really good example here in Texas. Texas was the last of the states that engaged in the war between the states to fall. And Texas had been a nation. From 1838 to 1845 had been a nation when it was, what is it when you, anyway, it allegedly became a state. What happens when a city's next to another place and they grab a hold of it? What's that called?
Annexed.
Annexed, yeah. Annexed in as a state. Yeah, that's how Texas came in to the Union in 1845.